Hey everybody, welcome to the Hidebound Convivium. Some of you may be confused by the sort of new setup. It's something new I'm trying for reading, for book-related videos, such as the one we're doing today. I've got my sort of little simulated hearth here. I'm up in the corner. There's me. Some of you may comment on the particularly bad quality of the video. um, that is because A, my computer can't really handle high definition, and B, I could point two giant LED lamps at my face while I do this, but then it would make the reading a little bit less enjoyable for me. Um, so, what are we doing today? What's on the agenda? Well, for today, the idea is I'm going to finish the reading of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I believe the last part that I recorded for that poem was back in September. So it's been quite a while, and I'm hoping to get that finished because it is a wonderful poem, and I want people to be able to have access to it. Especially this J.R.R. Tolkien translation that I'm reading, which is very colorful. And also, it's an excellent Christian story. It's an excellent example of medieval romance, and it's originally in English, so it's not even like you. I mean, you do have to worry about the translation in some sense because it was originally in Middle English, but it's a little. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to get into the weeds about translation, but regardless, that's on the agenda today. That's on the docket is finishing up Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So this will be part 3. Next video will be part 4, and then I believe there's a part 5, which I'll read directly afterwards. And these videos will come out in order, and they'll all be collected into a playlist. The reason why I decided to do it this way and sort of have these a little bit more informal is because I spent a lot of time editing part 1 and 2 to make the audio sound good, put in the music, and do that sort of thing. And honestly, it just took way too much time for what I was doing. So you kind of have to balance how much time you're putting in versus how much content you're putting out, and it's very obvious that in the case of Sir Gawain, I needed something a little bit more flexible. So that's the reason for the new format. If you like it, go ahead and tell me. If you don't, if you don't want to see my hideous countenance, please let me know so I can put a hood over my head or just never do the webcam thing again. But at any rate, guys, let me slap on some music because I do have music to accompany this reading. Just some sort of Renaissance lute music to sit in the background because I feel like it's a little bit awkward if it's too quiet. You know what I mean? And hopefully that's not too distracting, and we can go ahead and dive on into the story. So I'm going to recap part 1 and 2, and then I think we're going to move on straight to part 3. So what happens in part 1? The court at Camelot is gathered together for a feast at Christmastide, and a fey knight, the Green Knight, who is this towering man with a green skin, green beard, green armor, green everything, with a green axe, comes into the hall and he proposes a wager to King Arthur. He says, how about this? You give me a lick with this axe, and then in a year's time, I'll give you a lick back with the same axe. And everyone's looking around because they think, okay, this is obviously some sort of trick, some sort of riddle. But King Arthur can't refuse because this guy's gone into his hall and he's challenged him. He's called him out. So King Arthur's nephew, I believe it is, Sir Gawain, who is known for being the pious knight, he takes up the Green Knight's challenge, takes his axe, lops his head off, and the Green Knight picks up his head, gets it back on his horse, and says, haha, see you in a year, and rides off. So Sir Gawain, being the honorable knight that he is, around Michaelmas the next year, saddles up his horse and rides off to go find the Green Knight. Because even though he's pretty sure he's going to die, he's got to do it. He's got to fulfill his honor as a knight. So he cuts through the wilderness. He's looking for the Green Chapel of the Green Knight. He can't find it. And at the very end, because his shield, reminder, his shield has the pentangle on the front. And if you want to know more about the pentangle and the importance of the symbolism, I think I might have touched on that in the last video, but he's got the pentangle on the front, and on the back, or the reverse, is a picture of the Blessed Virgin. And he prays that the Blessed Virgin Mary guide him to some place where he can rest and observe and basically go to Mass for Christmas. And all of a sudden, there is a magical castle that pops up out of the landscape, which is automatically suspicious, but whatever. And he goes into the castle, and it is run by Lord and Lady Bersilac. And Lord and Lady Bersilac Lord Bersilac proposes a wager, a game. Lord Bersilac is going to go out hunting in the morning, and he's going to bring Sir Gawain back whatever he finds while he's on his hunt. And in the meantime, Sir Gawain is going to give Lord Bersilac back whatever he finds in the castle while he's there all day, resting up from his travels. Also worth noting is that Lady Bersilac is very beautiful. That will become important later. So we're going to go ahead and plow on into part 3. Here we go. I'm reading the J.R.R. Tolkien translation from the 3rd edition of the Longman Anthology, Volume 1A, The Middle Ages, of the Longman series on British literature. So, here we go. Part 3. Before the first daylight, the folk uprose. The guests that were to go for their grooms they called, and they hurried up in haste, horses to saddle, to stow all their stuff and strap up their bags. The men of rank arrayed them for riding got ready. To saddle leaped swiftly, seized then their bridles, and went off on their ways where their wish was to go. Their liege lord of the land was not last of them all to be ready to ride with a rout of his men. He ate a hurried mouthful after hearing of mass, and with horn to the hunting field he hastened at once. When daylight was opened yet dimly on earth, he and his huntsmen were up on their high horses. Then the leaders of the hounds leashed them out in couples, unclosed the kennel door, and cried to them, "Out!" and blew boldly on bugles 3 blasts full long. Beagles bayed thereat, a brave noise making, and they whipped and wheeled in those that wandered on a scent. 100 hunting dogs I have heard of, the best were they. To their stations keepers passed, the leashes were cast away, and many a routing blast woke din in the woods that day. At the first burst of the baying, all beasts trembled. Deer dashed through the dale by dread bewildered, and hastened to the heights, but they were hotly greeted, and turned back by the beaters, who boldly shouted. They let the harts go past with their high antlers, and the brave bucks also with their branching palms. For the lord of the castle had decreed in the close season that no man should molest the male of the deer. The hinds were held back with hay and warray. The does driven with great din to the deep valleys. There could be seen let slip a sleet of arrows. At each turn under the tree went a twanging shaft, that into brown hides bit hard and barbed head. Lo, they brayed and they bled, and on the banks they died. And ever the hounds in haste hotly pursued them, with hunters with high horns hurrying behind them, with such a clamour and cry as if cliffs had been riven. If any beast broke away from the bowmen their shooting, it was snatched down and slain at the receiving station. When they had been harried from the height and hustled to the waters, the men were so wise in their craft at the watches below, and their greyhounds were so great, they got them at once, and flung them down in a flash, as fast as men could see with sight. The lord then wild for joy, did oft spur and oft alight, and thus in bliss employ that day till dark of night. Thus in his game the lord goes under greenwood eaves, and Gawain the bold lies in goodly bed, lazing till the walls are lit by the light of day, under costly coverlet, with curtains about him. And as in slumber he strayed, he heard stealthily come a soft sound at his door as it secretly opened, and from under the clothes he craned then his head. A corner of the curtain he caught up a little, and looked that way warily to learn what it was. It was the lady herself, most lovely to see, that cautiously closed the door quietly behind her, and drew near to his bed. Then abashed was the knight, and lay down swiftly to look as if he slept. and she stepped silently and stole to his bed, cast back the curtain, and crept then within, and sat her down softly on the side of the bed, and there lingered very long to look for his waking. He lay there, lurking a long while, and wondered and mused in his mind how the matter would go, to what point it might pass, to some surprise he fancied. Yet he said to himself, more seemly 'twould be in due course with question to inquire what she wishes. Then rousing, he rolled over, and round to her turning, he lifted his eyelids with a look as of wonder, and signed him with the cross, thus safer to be kept aright, with chin and cheek so sweet, of blended red and white, with grace them him did greet, small lips with laughter bright. Good morning, Sir Gawain, said that gracious lady. You are a careless sleeper, if one can creep up on you so. Now quickly you are caught. If we come not to terms, I shall bind you in your bed, you may be assured. With laughter the lady thus lightly jested. Good morning to your grace, said Gawain gaily. You shall work on me your will, and well I am pleased, for I submit immediately, and for mercy I cry, and that is best, as I deem, for I am obliged to do so. Thus he jested in return with much gentle laughter. But if you would, lady gracious, then leave grant me, and release your prisoner, and pray him to rise. I would abandon this bed, and better array me, the more pleasant would it prove than to parley with you. Nay, forsooth, fair sir, said the sweet lady, you shall not go from your bed. I will govern you better. Here fast shall I enfold you on the far side also, and then talk with my true knight, that I have taken so. For I wot well indeed that Sir Gawain you are, to whom all men pay homage wherever you ride. Your honour, your courtesy, by the courteous is praised, by lords, by ladies, by all living people. And right here you are now, and we all by ourselves. My husband and his huntsmen far hence have ridden, other men are abed, and my maids also, the door closed, and caught with a clasp that is strong. And since I have in this house one that all delight in, my time to account I will turn, while for talk I chance have still. To my body will you welcome be, of delight to take your fill, for need constraineth me to serve you, and I will. Upon my word, said Gawain, that is well, I guess, though I am not now he of whom you are speaking to attain such honour as here you tell of. I am a knight unworthy, as well indeed I know. By God, I would be glad, if good to you seemed, whatever I could say or in service could offer to the pleasure of your excellence. It would be pure delight. In good faith, Sir Gawain, said the gracious lady, the prowess and excellence that all others approve, if I scorned or decried them, it were scant courtesy. But there are ladies in number who livelier would now have thee in their hold, sir, as I have thee here, pleasantly to play within polished converse, their solace to seek and their sorrows to soothe, that great part of the goods or gold that they have. But I thank him who on high is in. Wow, this is a tongue twister. But I thank him who on high of heaven is Lord, that I have here wholly in my hand what all desire by grace. She was an urgent wooer, that lady fair of face. The knight, with speeches pure, replied in every case. Madam, said he merrily, Mary reward you, for I have enjoyed in good faith your generous favour, and much honour have had else from others' kind deeds. But as for the courtesy they accord me, since my claim is not equal, the honour is your own, who are ever well-meaning. Nay, Mary, the lady demurred, as for me, I deny it. For were I worth all the legion of women alive, and all the wealth in the world at will possessed, if I should exchange at my choice, and choose me a husband for the noble nature I know, Sir Knight, in thee here, in beauty and bounty and bearing so gay, of which earlier I have heard, and hold it now true, then no lord alive would I elect before you. In truth, lady, he replied, you took one far better, but I am proud of the praise you are pleased to give me, and as your servant in earnest, my sovereign I hold you, and your knight I become, and may Christ reward you. Thus of many matters they spoke till mid-morn was past, and ever the lady demeaned her as one that loved him much, and he fenced with her featly, ever flawless in manner. Though I were lady most lovely, thought the lady to herself, the less love would he bring here, since he looked for his bane that blow, that him so soon should grieve, and needs it must be so. Then the lady asked for leave, and at once he let her go. Then she gave him good day, and with a glance she laughed. And as she stood, she astonished him with the strength of her words. Now he that prospers all speed for this disport repay you. But that you should be, Gawain, it gives me much thought. Why so? Then eagerly the knight asked her, afraid that he had failed in the form of his converse. But God bless you for this reason, blithely she answered, that one so good as Gawain the gracious is held, who all the compass of courtesy includes in his person, so long with a lady could hardly have lingered without craving a kiss, as a courteous knight by some tactful turn that their talk led to. Then said Gawain, very well, as you wish it be done. I will kiss at your command, as becometh a knight, and more, lest he displease you, so plead it no longer. She came near thereupon, and caught him in her arms, and down daintily bending dearly she kissed him. They courteously commended each other to Christ. Without more ado, through the door she withdrew and departed, and he to rise up in haste made ready at once. He calls to his chamberlain, and chooses his clothes, and goes forth when garbed all gladly to mass. Then he went to a meal that meetly awaited him, and made merry all day, till the moon arose o'er earth. Ne'er was a knight so gaily engaged between two dames of worth, the youthful and the aged, together they made much mirth. And ever the lord of the land in his delight was abroad, hunting by holt and heath, and after hinds that were barren. When the sun began to slope, he had slain such a number of does and other deer, one might doubt it were true. Then the fell folk at last came flocking all in, and quickly of the kill they a quarry assembled. Thither the master hastened with a host of his men, gathered together those greatest in fat, and had them riven open rightly, as the rules require. At the assay they were searched by some that were there. With 2 fingers' breadth of fat they found in the leanest. Next they slit the eslet, seized on the arbor, shaved it with a sharp knife, and shore away the grease. Next ripped the 4 limbs, and rent off the hide. Then they broke up in the belly. The bowels they removed, flinging them nimbly afar, and the flesh of the notch they grasped then the gorge, disengaging with skill the weasand from the windpipe, and did away with the guts. Then they shore out the shoulders with their sharpened knives, drawing the sinews through a small cut, the sides to keep whole. Next they burst open the breast, and broke it apart, and again at the gorge one begins thereupon, cuts all up quickly, till he comes to the fork, and fetches forth the 4 numbles, and following after all the tissues along the ribs they tear away quickly. Thus by bones of the back they broke off with skill, down even to the haunch, all that were hung there together, and hoisted it up all whole, and hewed it off there. And that they took for the numbles, as I trow is their name in kind, along the fork of every thigh, the flaps they fold behind, to hew it in 2 they hie, down the back all to unbind. Both the head and the neck they hew off after, and next swiftly they sunder the sides from the chine, and the bone for the crow they cast in the bows. Then they thrust through both thick sides with a thong by the rib, and then by the hocks of the legs they hang them both up. All the folk earn the fees that fall to their lot. Upon the fell of the fair beast they fed their hounds then, on the liver and the lights and the leather from the paunches, with bread bathed in blood blenched among them. Boldly they blew the prize amid the barking of dogs, and then bearing up the venison bent their way homeward, striking up strongly many a stout horn call. When daylight was done, they all duty were come into the noble castle, where quietly the knight abode in bliss by bright fire set. Thither the lord now strode, when Gawain with him met. Then free all pleasure flowed. Then the master commanded his men to meet in that hall, and both dames came down with their damsels also. Before all the folk on the floor fair men he ordered, to fetch there forthwith his venison before him. And all gracious and game to Gawain he called, announced the number by tally of the nimble beasts, and he showed him the shining fat all shorn on the ribs. How does this play please you? Have I praise deserved? Have I earned mine art of the heartiest thanks? Yea, verily, the other averred. Here is venison the fairest that I have seen in the 7 years in the season of winter. And I give it to you all, Gawain, said the good man at once. For as our covenant accorded, you may claim it as your own. That is true, he returned. And I tell you the same, what of worth within these walls have I won also? With his goodwill, I warrant, 'tis awarded you. His fair neck he enfolded, then fastened his arms, and kissed him with all the kindness that his courtesy knew. There, take your gains, sir, I got nothing more. I would give it up gladly, even if it greater were. That is a good one, quoth the good man. Greatly I thank you. 'Tis such, maybe, that you'd better briefly now tell me where you won the same wealth by your wits you possess. That was not the covenant, quoth he. Do not question me more, for you've drawn what is due to you. No doubt can you have, 'tis true. They laugh, and with voices fair their merriment pursue, and to supper soon repair with many dainties new. Later by the chimney in the chamber they were seated. Abundant wine of the best was brought to them oft, and again as a game they agreed on the morrow to abide by the same bond as they had bargained before. Chance, what might chance, to exchange all their trade. Whatever new thing they got when they gathered at night, they concluded this compact before the courtiers all. The drink for the bargain was brought forth in jest. Then they leave at last they lovingly took, and away then at once each went to his bed. When the cock had crowed and cackled but thrice, the lord leaped from his bed, and his lieges each one, so that their meal had been made, and the mass was over. And folk bound for the forest, ere the first daybreak to chase, loud with hunters and horns, o'er the plains they passed apace, and loosed there among the thorns the running dogs to race. Soon these cried for a quest in a covert by a marsh. The huntsman hailed the hound that first heeded the scent. Stirring words he spoke to him with a strident voice. The hounds then that heard it hastened thither swiftly, and fell fast on the lion, some 40 at once. Then such a baying and a babble of bloodhounds together arose that the rock wall hanging all about them, hunters enheartened them with horn and with mouth, and then all in a rout rushed on together, between a fen pool in that forest and a frowning crag. In a tangle under the tall cliff at the tarn's edges, where the rough rock ruggedly in ruin was fallen, they fared to the find, followed by the hunters, who made a cast round the crag and the clutter of stones, till well they were aware that it waited within, the very beast that baying bloodhounds had spoken. Then they beat on the bushes and bade him uprise, and forth he came to their peril against folk in his path. 'Twas a boar without rival that burst out upon them. Long the herd he had left, that lone beast aged, for savage was he, of all swine the hugest, grim indeed when he grunted, then aghast were many. For 3 of the first thrust he threw to the ground, and sprang off with great speed, sparing the others. And they hallooed on high, and ha-ha shouted, and held horn to mouth, blowing hard the rally. Many were the wild mouthings of men and of dogs, and as they bounded after this boar, with him with blare and with din to quell. Many times he turned to bay, and maims the pack pell-mell. He hurts many hounds, and they grievously yowl and yell. Hunters then hurried up eagerly to shoot him, aimed at him their arrows, often they hit him, but poor at core proved the points that pitched on his shields, and the barbs on his brows would not bite at all. Though the shaven shaft shivered in pieces, back the head came hopping wherever it hit him. But when the hurts went home of their heavier strokes, then the brain wild for battle he burst out upon them. Ruthless he rent them as he rushed forward, and many quailed at his coming and quickly withdrew. But the lord on a light horse went leaping after him, as bold man on battlefield with his bugle he blew the rallying call as he rode through the rough thickets, pursuing this wild swine till the sunbeams slanted. This day in such doings thus duly they passed, while our brave knight beloved there lies in his bed, at home, in good hap, in housing so costly and gay. The lady did not forget, she came to bid good day. Early she on him set, his will to wear away. She passed to the curtain, and peeped at the knight. Sir Gawain graciously then welcomed her first, and she answered him alike, eagerly speaking, and sat her softly by his side. And suddenly she laughed, and with a look full of love delivered these words. Sir, if you are Gawain, a wonder I think it, that a man so well-meaning, ever mindful of good, yet cannot comprehend the customs of the gentle. And if one acquaints you therewith, you do not keep them in mind. Thou hast forgot altogether what a day ago I taught by the plainest points I would put into words. What is that? He asked at once. I am not aware of it at all. But if you are telling the truth, I must take all the blame. And yet as to kisses, she quoth, this counsel I give you, wherever favor is found, defer not to claim them. that becomes all who care for courteous manners. Take back, said the true knight, that teaching, my dear, for that I dared not do, for dread of refusal. Were I rebuffed, I should be to blame for so bold an offer. Ma fay, said the fair lady, you may not be refused. You are stout enough to constrain one by strength if you like, if any were so ill-bred as to answer you nay. Indeed, by God, quoth Gawain, you graciously speak. But force finds no favour among the folk where I dwell, and any gift not given gladly and freely. I am at your call, and command to kiss when you please. You may receive as you desire, and cease as you think in place. Then down the lady bent, and sweetly kissed his face. Much speech then there they spent, of lovers' grief and grace. I would learn from you, lord, the lady then said, if you would not mind my asking, what is the meaning of this, that one so young as you are in years, and so gay by renown, so well known for knighthood and breeding, while of all chivalry the choice, the chief thing to praise, is the loyal practice of love, the very lore of knighthood. For talking of the toils that these true knights suffer, it is the title and contents and text of their works, how lovers for their true love their lives have imperiled, have endured for their dear one dolorous trials, until avenged by their valor their adversity past. They have brought bliss into her bower by their own brave virtues, and you are the knight of the most noble renown in our age, and your fame and fair name afar is published, and I have sat by your very self now for the second time, yet your mouth has never made any remark I have heard that ever belonged to love-making, lesser or greater. Surely you that are so accomplished and so courtly in your vows should be prompt to expound to a young pupil by signs and examples the science of lovers. Why, are you ignorant who all honor and joy? Or else you esteem me too stupid to understand your courtship? But nay, here single I come and sit, a pupil for your play. Come teach me of your wit, while my lord is far away. In good faith, said Gawain, my God reward you. Great delight I gain, and am glad beyond measure, that one so worthily as you should be willing to come here, and take pains with so poor a man. As for playing with your knight, showing favour in any form, it fills me with joy. But for me to take up the task on true love to lecture, to comment on the text and the tales of knighthood to you, who I am certain possess far more skill in that art by the half than 100 of such as I am, or shall ever be while on earth I remain, it would be folly manifold, in faith, my lady. All your will I would wish to work, as I am able, being so beholden in honour, and so help me the Lord, desiring ever the servant of yourself to remain. Thus she tested and tried him, tempting him often, so as to allure him to love-making, whatever lay in her heart. But his defence was so fair that no fault could be seen, nor any evil upon either side, nor aught but joy they wist. They laughed, and long they played. At last she him them kissed, with grace adieu him bade, and went whereso she list. Then rousing from his rest, he rose to hear mass, and then their dinner was laid and daintily served. The livelong day with ladies in delight he spent, but the lord of the lands leaped to and fro, pursuing his fell swine that over the slopes hurtled, and bit asunder the backs of the best of his hounds. Wherever to bay he was brought, until the bowman dislodged him, and made him maugre his teeth, move again onward, so fast the shafts flew when the folks were assembled. And yet the stoutest of them still he made start there aside, till at last he was so spent he could speed no further. But in such haste as he might, he made for a hollow on a reef beside a rock where the river was flowing. He put the bank at his back, began then to paw. Fearfully the froth of his mouth foamed from the corners. He whetted his white tusks, and then weary were all the brave men so bold by him to stand, of plaguing him from afar. Yet for peril they dared not come nigher. He had hurt so many before, that none had now desire to be torn with tusks once more of a beast both mad and dire. Till the knight himself came, with his coursers spurring, and saw him brought there to bay, and all about him his men. Nothing loth he alighted, and leaving his horse, brandished a bright blade, and boldly advanced, striding stoutly through the ford to where stood the felon. The wild beast was aware of him with his weapon in hand, and high raised his hair with such hate he snorted, that folk feared for the knight, lest his foes should worst him. Out came the swine, and set on him at once, and the boar and the brave man were both in a melee, in the wildest of the water. The worse had the beast, for the man marked him well, and as they met he at once struck steadily his point straight in the neck slot, and hit him up to the hilts, so that his heart was riven, and with a snarl he succumbed, and was swept down the water straightway. 100 hounds him caught, and fiercely bit their prey. The men to the bank him brought, and dogs him dead did lay. There men blew for the prize in many a blaring horn, and high and loud hallooed all the hunters that could. Bloodhounds bayed for the beast, as bayed the masters, who of that hard-run chase were the chief huntsmen. Then one that well learned in woodsman's lore, with pretty cunning began to carve up this boar. First he hewed off his head, and on high set it up. Then he rent him roughly down the ridge of the back, brought out the bowels, burned them on the gleeds, and with them blended with blood the bloodhounds rewarded. Next he broke up the boar flesh in broad slabs of brawn, and hauled forth the haslets in order all duty. And yet all whole he fastened the halves together, and strongly on a stout pole he strung them then up. And with his swipe homeward swiftly they hastened, and the boar's head was borne before the brave knight himself, who felled him in the ford by force of his hands so great. Until he saw Sir Gawain in the hall, he could hardly wait. He called, and his pay to gain, the other came there straight. The lord with his loud voice and laughter merry, gaily he greeted him when Gawain he saw. The fair ladies were fetched, and the folk all assembled, and he showed them the shorn slabs and shaped his report of the width and wondrous length, and the wickedness also in war of the wild swine, as in the woods he had fled. With fair words his friend the feat then applauded, and praised the great prowess he had proved in his deeds. For such brawn on a beast the brave knight declared, or such sides on a swine he had never seen before. They then handled the huge head, and highly he praised it, showing horror at the hideous thing to honor the Lord. Now, Gawain, said the good man, this game is your own by close covenant we concluded, as clearly you know. That is true, he returned, and as truly I assure you, all my winnings I warrant I shall award you in exchange. He clasped his neck, and courteously a kiss he gave him, and swiftly with a second he served him on the spot. Now we are quits, he quoth, and clear for this evening of all covenants as we accorded, since I came to this house as is due. The lord said, By Saint Giles, your match I never knew. You'll be wealthy in a while, such a trade if you pursue. Then on top of the trestles the tables they laid, cast the cloths thereon, and clear light then wakened along the walls, waxen torches. Men sat there, and servants went swift about the hall. Much gladness and gaiety began then to spring round the fire on the hearth, and freely and oft, at supper and later, many songs of delight, such as canticles of Christmas, and new carol dances, amid all the mannerly mirth that men can tell of, and ever our noble knight was next to the lady. Such glances she gave him of her gracious favor, secretly stealing sweet looks that strong man to charm, that he was passing perplexed and ill-pleased at heart. Yet he could feign naught of his courtesy coldly refuse her, but graciously engaged her, however, against the grain of the play. And when mirth they had made in the hall, as long as they wished to stay, to a room did the lord them call, and to the ingle they made their way. There amid merry words and wine they had a mind once more to harp on the same note on New Year's Eve. But said Gawain, Grant me leave to go on the morrow, for the appointment approaches that I pledged myself to. The lord was loath to allow it, and longer would keep him, and said, As I am a true man, I swear on my troth, that the green chapel thou shalt gain, and go to your business in the dawn of the new year, sir, ere daytime begins. So still lie upstairs, and stay at thine ease, and I shall hunt in the holt here, and hold to my terms with thee truly, when I return to trade all our gains. For I have tested thee twice, and trusty I find thee. Now third time pays for all, bethink thee tomorrow. Make me merry while we may, and be mindful of joy. For the woe one may win whenever one wishes. This was graciously agreed, and Gawain would linger. Then gaily drink is given them, and they go to their beds with light. Sir Gawain lies and sleeps, soft and sound all night. His host in his hunting keeps, and is early arrayed aright. After mass of a morsel, he and his men partook. Merry was the morning. For his mount then he called. All the huntsmen that on the horse behind him should follow were ready mounted to ride arrayed at the gates. Wondrous fair were the fields, for the frost clung there, in red rose hued over the wrack arises the sun. Sailing clear along the coasts of the cloudy heavens, the hunters loosed hounds by a holt border, and the rocks rang in the woods to the roar of their horns. Some fell on the line to where the fox was lying, and crossing and recrossing it in the cunning of their craft, a hound then gives tongue. The huntsman names him, round him press his companions in a pack all snuffling, running forth in a rabble that right in his path the fox flits before them. They find him at once, and when they see him by sight they pursue him hotly, decrying him full clearly with a clamour of wrath. He dodges and ever doubles through many a dense coppice, and looping oft he lurks and listens under the fence. At last, at a little ditch, he leaps over a thorn hedge, sneaks out secretly from the side of a thicket, weens he is out of the wood, and away by his wiles from the hounds. Thus he went unawares to a watch that was posted, where fierce on him fell 3 foes all at once, all grey. He swerves them swift again, and dauntless darts astray. In grief and in great pain, to the wood he turns away. Then to hark to the hounds it was heart's delight, when all the pack came upon him, there pressing together such a curse at the view they called down on him, that the clustering cliffs might have clattered in ruin. Here he was hallooed when the hunters came on him. Yonder he was assailed with snarling tongues. There he was threatened, and oft thief he was called. With ever the trailers at his trail, so tarry he could not. Oft he was run at. If he rushed outwards, oft he swerved in again. So subtle was Reynard. Yea, and he led the lord and his hunt as laggards behind him, thus by mount and by hill till mid-afternoon. Meanwhile, the courteous knight in the castle in comfort slumbered, behind the comely curtains in the cold morning. By the lady in love-making had no liking to sleep, nor to disappoint the purpose she had planned in her heart. But rising up swiftly in his room now she sought, in a gay mantle that to the ground was measured, and was fur-lined most fairly with fells well trimmed, that no comely coif on her head, only the clear jewels that were twinned in her treasure by the 20s in clusters. Her noble face and her neck all naked were laid, her bare breast in front, and at the back also. She came through the chamber door, and closed it behind her. Wide set a window, and to wake him she called, thus greeting him gaily with her gracious words of cheer. Ah, man, how canst thou sleep? The morning is so clear. He lay in darkness deep, but her call he then could hear. In heavy darkness drowsing the dream words muttered, as a man whose mind was bemused with many mournful thoughts, how destiny should his doom on that day bring him, when he at the green chapel the great man would meet, and he obliged his blow to abide without debate at all. But when so comely she came, he recalled then his wits, swept aside his slumbers, and swiftly made answer. The lady in lovely guise came laughing sweetly, bent down over his dear face, and deftly kissed him. He greeted her graciously with a glad welcome. Seeing her so glorious and gaily attired, so faultless in her features and so fine in her hues, that at once joy upwelling went warm to his heart. With smiles sweet and soft they turned swiftly to mirth, and only brightness and bliss were broached there between them so gay. They spoke then speeches good, much pleasure was in that play. Great perils between them stood, unless Mary for her knight should pray. For she, queenly and peerless, pressed him so closely, led him so near the line, that at last he must needs either refuse her with offence or her favours there take. He cared for her courtesy, less a caitiff he proved, yet more for his sad case, if he should commit sin, and to the owner of the house, to his host be a traitor. God help me, said he, happen that shall not. Smiling sweetly aside from himself, then he turned all the fond words of favour that fell from her lips. She said to the knight then, Now shame you deserve, if you love not one that lies alone here beside you, who beyond all women in the world is wounded in heart, unless you have a leman more beloved, whom you like better, and have affianced faith to that fair one so fast and so true, that your release you desire not. And so I believe now, as to tell me if that be so truly, I beg you, for all sakes that men swear by, conceal not the truth in guile. The knight said, By St. John, and softly gave a smile, Nay, lover I have none, and none will have meanwhile. Those words, said the woman, are the worst that could be, but I am answered indeed, and 'tis hard to endure. Kiss me now kindly, and I will quickly depart. But I may but mourn while I live, as one that much is in love. Sighing, she sank down, and sweetly she kissed him. Then soon she left his side, and said as she stood there, Now, my dear, at this parting, do me this pleasure. Give me something as thy gift, thy glove it might be, that I may remember thee, dear man, my mourning to lessen. Now on my word, then said he, I wish I had here the loveliest thing for thy delight that in the land I possess. For worthily have you earned wondrously often more reward by rights than within my reach would now be, save to allot you as some love token thing of little value. Beneath your honor it is to have here and now a glove for a guerdon, as the gift of Sir Gawain. And I am here on an errand in unknown lands, and have no bearers with baggage and beautiful things. Unluckily, dear lady, for your delight at this time, a man must do as he is placed. Be not pained nor aggrieved, said he. She said she so comely clad, Nay, noble knight and free, though naught of yours I had, you should get a gift from me. A rich ring she offered him, of red gold fashioned, with a stone like a star standing up clear, that bore brilliant beams as bright as the sun. I warrant you it was worth wealth beyond measure. But the knight said nay to it, and announced then at once, I will have no gifts, for God, of your grace at this time. I have none to return you, and naught will I take. She proffered it, and pressed him, and he her pleading refused, and swore swiftly upon his word that accept it he would not. And she, sorry that he refused, said to him further, If to my ring you say nay, since too rich it appears, and you would not so deeply be indebted to me, I shall give you my girdle, less gain will be that. She unbound a belt swiftly that, embracing her sides, was clasped above her kirtle under her comely mantle. Fashioned it was of green silk, with gold finished, though only braided round about, embroidered by hand, and this she would give to Gawain, and gladly besought him, of no worth though it were, to be willing to take it. And he said nay, he would not. He would never receive either gold or jewelry, ere God the Grace sent him to accomplish the quest on which he had come thither. And therefore I pray you please be not angry, and cease to insist on it. For to your suit I will ever say no. I am deeply in debt to you, for the favor that you show, to be your servant true, for ever in weal or woe. Do you refuse now this silk, said the fair lady, because in itself it is poor, and so it appears. See how small 'tis in size, and smaller in value. But one who knew of the nature of this knit therewithin would appraise it probably at a price far higher. For whoever goes girdled with this green riband, while he keeps it well clasped closely about him, there is none so hardy under heaven that to hew him were able, for he could not be killed by any cunning of hand. The knight then took note, and thought now in his heart, 'twould be a prize in that peril that was appointed to him, when he gained the green chapel, to get there his sentence. If by some slight he were not slain, 'twould be a sovereign device. Then he bore with her rebuke, and debated not her words, and she pressed him on the belt, and proffered it in earnest. And he agreed, and she gave it very gladly indeed, and prayed him for her sake to part with it never, but on his honor hide it from her husband. And he then agreed that no one ever should know, nay, none in the world but they. With earnest heart and mood, great thanks he oft did say, and then the knight so good a third time kissed that day. And then she left him alone, her leave taking, for amusement from the man no more could she get. When she was gone, Sir Gawain got him soon ready, arose and robed himself in raiment noble. He laid up the lovelace that the lady had given, hiding it heedfully where he after might find it. Then first of all he chose to fare to the chapel, privately approached a priest, and prayed that he there would uplift his life, that he might learn better how his soul should be saved when he was sent from the world. There he cleanly confessed him, and declared his misdeeds, both the more and the less, and for mercy he begged to absolve him of them all. He besought the good man, and he assoiled him, and made him as safe and as clean as for doomsday indeed, were it due on the morrow. Thereafter more merry he made among the fair ladies, with carol dances gentle, and all kinds of rejoicing, than ever did ere that day, till the darkness of night in bliss. Each man there said, I vow, a delight to all he is. Since hither he came till now, he was ne'er so gay as this. Now indoors let him dwell, and have dearest delight, while the free lord yet fares afield in his sports. At last the fox he he has felled that he followed so long. For as he spurred through the spiny to espy there the villain, where the hounds he had heard that hard on him pressed, Reynard and his road came through a rough thicket, and all the rabble in a rush were right on his heels. The man is aware of the wild thing, and watchful awaits him, brings out his bright band, and at the beast hurls it, and he blenched at the blade, and would have backed if he could. A hound hastened up, and had him ere he could, and right before the horse's feet they fell on him all, and worried there the wily one with wild clamour. The Lord quickly alights and lifts him at once, snatching him swiftly from their slavering mouths, holds him high o'er his head, hallooing loudly, and there bay at him fiercely many furious hounds. Huntsmen hurried thither with horns full many, ever sounding the assembly, till they saw the master. When together they come his company noble, all that ever bore bugle were blowing at once, and all the others hallooed that had not a horn. It was the merriest music that ever men hearkened. The resounding song there raised for that Reynard's soul awoke. To hounds they pay their fees, their heads they fondly stroke, and Reynard they seize, and off they skin his cloak. And then homeward they hastened, for at hand was now night, making strong music on their mighty horns. The Lord alighted at last at his beloved abode, found a fire in the hall, and fair by the hearth. Sir Gawain the good and gay was he too. Among the ladies in delight his lot was most joyful. He was clad in a blue cloak that came to the ground. His surcoat well beseemed him, with its soft lining, and its hood of like hue that hung on his shoulder, all fringed with white fur, very finely were both. He met indeed the master in the midst of the floor, and in gaiety greeted him, and graciously said, In this case I will first our covenant fulfill, that to our good we agreed, when ungrudged went the drink. He clasped in the knight, and kisses him thrice, as long and deliciously as he could lay upon him. By Christ, the other quoth, you've come by a fortune in winning such wares. Were they worth what you paid? Indeed, the price was not important, promptly he answered, whereas plainly is paid now the profit I gained. Marry, said the other man, mine is not up to it, for I have hunted all this day, and naught else have I got but this foul foxfell. The fiend have the goods, and that is the price very poor to pay for such treasures as these you have thrust upon me, 3 such kisses so good. 'Tis enough then, said Gawain. I thank you, by the rood, and how the fox was slain. He told him as they stood. With mirth and minstrelsy, that's an interesting word, and meats at their pleasure, as merry they made as any man could, amid the laughter of ladies and light words of jest. Both Gawain and the good man could no gayer have proved, unless they had doted indeed, or else drunken had been. Both the host and the household went on with their games, till the hour had approached, when part they must all. To bed were now bound the brave folk at last. Bowing low his leave of the Lord there first, the good knight then took, and graciously thanked him. For such a wondrous welcome as within these walls I have had. For your honour at this high feast the high king reward you. In your service I set myself your servant, if you will, for I must needs make a move tomorrow, as you know. If you give me some good man to go, as you promised, and guide me to the Green Chapel, as God may permit me to face on New Year's Day such doom as befalls me. On my word, said his ghost, with hearty goodwill, to all that ever I promised I promptly shall hold. Then a servant he assigns him to set him on the road, and by the downs to conduct him, that without doubt or delay he might through wild and through wood ways most straight pursue. Said Gawain, my thanks receive, such a favour you will do. The knight then took his leave, of those noble ladies too. Sadly he kissed him, and said his farewells, and pressed oft upon them in plenty his thanks, and they promptly the same again repaid him. To God's keeping they gave him, grievously sighing. Then from the people of the castle he with courtesy parted. All the men that he met he remembered with thanks, for their care for his comfort and their kind service, and the trouble each had taken in attendance upon him, and every one was as woeful to wish him adieu, as he had lived all their lives with his lordship and honour. Then with link men and lights he was led to his chamber, and brought sweetly to bed, there to be at his rest. That soundly he slept, then assert will I not, for he had many matters to the morning to mind. If he would in thought, then let him lie in peace. Near now is the tryst he sought. If a while you will hold your peace, I will tell the deeds they wrought. So that was part 3 of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Part 4 will be forthcoming, and yes, I do believe Part 4 is the final part of the epic poem, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. This is one of my favorite poems, so certainly I enjoy it. And like I said, be looking out for Part 4, and I believe attached along with Part 4, maybe in a separate video, will be a little bit of analysis, perhaps, on the poem itself. But at any rate, this has been the Hidebound Convivium. God bless, and have a great rest of the day.